Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today. We're going to spend some time this first hour here looking back over the debate that took place between Senator Cruz and Representative O'Rourke. Look ahead to the next debate, but also get into a lot of other political issues. And whenever we want to do that, we want to bring in Kathy Ward, who is the co-host of JP, Kathy, and the Crew. And you were on this morning. On yesterday, I even heard you talk about the debate, so I got a little bit of a preview of what you're going to say.
You already know what I'm going to rant and rave about?
I think so. That will be the case. But I thought before we get there, you know, if you are fairly visible, and you and I do radio, so we aren't necessarily, not everybody recognizes who we are, but if you are Glenn Beck, or if you're Pam Bondi, or if you're Sarah Huckabee Sanders, or now if you are Ted and Heidi Cruz, people will assault you at a restaurant. Tell us.
You can't even have a private life. Well, first of all, Kerby, thank you so much for having me on your show again. I love your show. This is just so exciting for me, so I'm honored to be here, and thank you for having me back. I'm floored because it was obvious that they were out on a date night. And as you know, if you've got a busy life, especially like Senator Ted Cruz, he's very busy right now. And if you've got small children, those nights for a husband and wife are precious. And even if it was just him at the restaurant, doesn't he have the right to sit at a restaurant and eat in peace? And last night, his wife and he were accosted. It was obvious. I even go into this. This is the fashion police kicking in. He wasn't dressed for a debate. He wasn't dressed for a political discussion or a political meeting. He was in casual clothes. They were out, obviously trying to enjoy each other's company. What has gone so wrong in society, Kerby, that you cannot be a United States Senator and his wife and sit down at a restaurant in Washington, D.C. and enjoy 45 minutes, an hour and a half alone without being attacked?
And again, we've got to recognize that these are getting really close. I wrote a commentary a while back after the attack, or the confrontation, probably not an attack, but a confrontation's a nice word.
Yes, let's be politically
with
correct.
Charlie Kirk and his assistant.
Yes.
And first of all, they're calling him racist, and his assistant's African Americans. I roll my eyes on that one.
Exactly.
But again, eating breakfast, and the bottom line is that they're calling their friends. And of course, with social media now, you can get together almost an instantaneous mob. And as I pointed out, here they're getting, shouting and everything, and he decides to put up his hands. But what if you misunderstand that? And as he puts up his hands, he thinks you think he's going to hit you, and who's going to throw the first punch?
Exactly.
How is that going to get out of hand real fast? Or Pam Bondi, Attorney General in Florida. Our listeners here in Texas and in Minnesota may not know her as well. But she goes to a premiere for the Mr. Rogers Neighborhood film.
Right.
Where you really don't expect to have any kind of
because it's a beautiful
confrontation.
day in the neighborhood, Kerby. Mr. Rogers was a nice, happy man.
And she's getting yelled at and everything. And then later they post some of these videos and say, well, we weren't bad. Well, that's after the police showed up, There was a guy standing right next to her, I guess it'd be boyfriend, said, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? Because he was just waiting for him to, for somebody to throw.
Right.
So this is not just these people are a little bit obnoxious. I use Glenn Beck. He was on an airplane and everybody was making sarcastic comments about him as they'd walk by him on, which again is not appropriate. But okay, that's probably not a fight going to develop on a plane. some of these people are so unhinged. You have to, if you are Ted Cruz, to say, where's my security detail? I mean, are they going to do something to my wife? I mean, heaven forbid, they would never like throw water in somebody's face, would they? Oh, I guess they do.
Or would they?
Yeah,
I
or
mean,
a drink in somebody's face.
We've got folks from Antifa, when they get out of control, they're bashing in windows of private sector companies and setting limousines on fire. The sad thing is, you don't know. I mean,
you just don't know.
You just don't know. I mean, you could have a Make America Great Again hat on. You could have a flag with you, and that's patriotic. That just means you love our country. Maybe you're on one side, maybe you're on the other, and it doesn't matter because you can get your head bashed in with a baseball bat nowadays. And that's what's so frightening, that we talk about unity. We talk about trying to reach across the aisles, and I hear all of this talk right now. If you're a United States Senator, right now, if you're Ted Cruz, you're worried, should I take my wife out into public for a date night again?
Of course.
And that's not okay.
That is not. And again, the bottom line, we won't stay on it too much longer, but just again to recognize how quickly things can get out of hand, because I used Charlie Kirk as an example. I think they threw water on him.
Right.
Well, what if he isn't sure it's water? And until it hits you, you don't know.
It could be acid. You don't know.
And it has been in Muslim countries.
Yes.
And
yes.
And so you just start. I mean, there's just too many possibilities for things to come unglued. And so I'm sure that Congressman O'Rourke will talk about that and apologize Sunday. We'll wait for it. I
will be anxious. Yes.
Yeah. But again, I think there's a great comeback for Ted Cruz and say, okay, you didn't encourage it, but people that like you are doing it. You know, has anybody gone up to Senator Dianne Feinstein in a restaurant because of the stunt she's pulled? Has anybody come up to Corey
Waters? I
don't
and that's
know
the thing.
anybody.
And what I want to know is, where is somebody? Where is a liberal, a progressive liberal, saying, you know what, we've got to draw a line somewhere? And again, at some point, we're not Republicans, we're not Democrats, we're not conservatives, we're not progressives. At some point, we're human beings, and isn't there some level of civility that you expect?
Yeah. And again, if you think this is just political, and most of it has been those who are leftists who are against, in this case, conservatives.
Right.
And by the way, the argument real quickly was, you've been friends with Kavanaugh, so that's the reason we can interrupt your dinner.
No.
Logically, that I missed a spot there. There was one part of that syllogism.
Where was that in Miss Manners' book?
But anyway, Ben, the bottom line is that it isn't just these people in politics, because, as you know, I have a chance to interview a number of very high-profile pastors.
Yes.
Very few of them now travel alone. And some of them, when I've met their people, I've bumped into them and recognized they're packing. This is a bodyguard that's with them.
And these are men of the cloth. Can you imagine that you never would have expected going into the ministry and that being your life? Mm-hmm. Now, if you're going to go into uncharted territory, which a lot of our dear friends do in a ministry capacity, you do know that that there are horrible things that can happen. But when you're in your own country, where, guess what? We have freedom of religion here. And then you have to feel like you need to defend yourself. Something's gone horribly wrong. We are losing our humanity, and that's what scares me to death. And you're right. I've seen like 5 different versions last night of social media with Senator Cruz and his wife. People immediately are taking their phone out, that personal device, recording it, and trying to provoke something. And so you know what Senator Cruz said? He said, "God bless you." And, moved on. Obviously, was very quick to get his wife out of there. Again, just where is that okay? And then she started yelling at him because he said, "God bless you." Like, is that mean?
It's just,
I love it when people say "God bless you" to me.
You can't
say
win.
it all day.
Yeah, can't win. All right. Well, we vented a little bit.
That's the first segment already?
Already. Now we'll get back to the debate right after these important messages. This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson. You know, conspiracies have been around for centuries, but the internet has made it much easier to promote a conspiracy that has the potential of going viral before rational people can begin to tamp down the hysteria. The older conspiracies were presented and promoted primarily by people who believed the government wasn't telling the whole truth. The National Treasure series of movies and the television shows like The X-Files probably even fed into some of that skepticism. But the latest conspiracies are coming from the left, who apparently see Nazi symbols and white power symbols just about everywhere. Here are two examples. During the confirmation hearings for Judge Brett Kavanaugh, attorney Zina Bash was sitting behind him. As a former law clerk for the judge, he was helping steer his nomination to the Supreme Court. Apparently, she has a tendency to rest her fingers on her arm in what could be best described as a reverse OK sign. One Twitter post complained that she was flashing a white power sign because they want to bring white supremacy to the Supreme Court. That post alone got more than 15,000 retweets. The internet uproar forced her husband to publicly defend Zina and point out that she is Jewish, Mexican-American, and the descendant of Holocaust survivors. Another series of examples is the number of times someone on the left sees Nazi symbols. One comedian asked a Twitter user, "Are you wearing a Nazi uniform?" The profile picture was actually of his father in an army uniform who was killed in Vietnam. A New York staffer was forced to resign when she accused a veteran who lost his legs in Afghanistan of being a Nazi because she assumed one of the tattoos was an Iron Cross when it was really a symbol for his platoon. The last few weeks have provided lots of examples of people on the left believing some bizarre conspiracies. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Universal 1440, Unbroken, Path to Redemption, the rest of World War II hero Louis Zamperini's true story, now playing, rated PG-13.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Kathy Ward in studio with us today, JP, Kathy, and the crew. An individual that also was one of our county commissioners and also the chairwoman for the Republican Party.
Oh, you can chairman. It's okay. Chairman. I'm not into that whole chairwoman, chairman.
She brings so much to the table, and so we're going to depend on that for a few minutes. And now people that have heard the morning show maybe heard some of this, but most of our listeners right now probably haven't heard you talk about the debate. Now, that took place Friday night.
Yes.
At SMU. We have another one coming up in Houston on Sunday. And I was wondering, as we came into this, how liberal were we going to hear Representative O'Rourke be? Because on a lot of issues, if you hear him in some venues, and I've watched some of the YouTube videos, you even go to his webpage, he is fairly liberal, progressive, whatever phrase you want to use.
He's progressive, yes.
And yet, in Texas, you don't want to be too much there, so you tend to use, code words and platitudes and things like that. I was pretty surprised. On a lot of issues, it became really clear that there is a stark difference between Ted Cruz, who owns the fact that he's a conservative.
Absolutely.
And in this case, Beto O'Rourke or Robert Francis O'Rourke, or however you want to call him.
Beto.
Anyway, I guess
that's a whole nother show we can talk about.
He says Beto, so we'll say Beto. But anyway, Representative O'Rourke, I try to keep their titles there, was very progressive. And I was struck by anybody who walks away. Debbie Georgiades, I think you know who she is.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Her tweet almost immediately, anybody that says there's no difference between Republicans and Democrats needed to watch this debate, because there was a difference.
She's spot on.
Yeah.
I felt like there were, it was very painfully obvious very quickly where each of the gentlemen stood, like you said, conservative versus liberal, in this case, progressive. But I'm going to go back to the fact that Senator Cruz is excellent at debating, and he is excellent at defending how he's voted.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing, and I've even talked to my friends who are very emotional and, well, Kathy, tell me, why I need to vote for Senator Cruz, and I don't want to hear just because he's Republican or this, that, or the other. And I said, look at their voting record. And very quickly, Senator Cruz was able to point out things like, okay, Congressman O'Rourke, you voted against body armor in the Congress for our first offenders. How do you defend that? And what I noticed when O'Rourke tried to come back with his concerns, it really turned into, and this is, and I kind of joked about this yesterday, but I told my husband Friday night, I said, if this was a college group of kids watching this, at this point, the next time he says, I've been to all 254 counties, everybody have a sip of beer, because this has become like a drinking game. He mentioned that over and over and over. Yeah. And while I understand, yes, that's a great thing to do. Heck, I wish I had the privilege of traveling to all 254 counties in our state. I don't. But he kept saying that over and over. And then he went into another thing. And I know elected officials, and I've been an elected official, and I've given those kinds of speeches. And every so often you're going to refer to a really sad case, something that people have really suffered as a result of some type of law. Right. But I felt like he kept trying to get every story that he talked about, instead of saying what he would do as the United States Senator, how he would vote, it was, well, let me tell you a sad story about so-and-so.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so at some point it became, you've got Senator Cruz, who was literally going right down the line saying where he stood on different things constitutionally, which that's important. I want to hear that. You're going to be the United States Senator for Texas. I want to know that you mirror my values and my thoughts. And with Beto, I just felt like there was more platitude and rhetoric, and I wanted to hear more specifics. Let's get back to illegal immigration. Ted Cruz, he stuck by his four words, and he also, which is, illegal, bad, legal, good. And then he mentioned his dad.
Mm-hmm. And told the story. Yeah.
Absolutely. You can't argue. How do you paint Senator Cruz as some bad guy who's against immigration when he's sitting there celebrating his father, who he has obvious, tremendous love and respect for? I just couldn't get over that.
Yeah. Well, and again, part of the reason that Representative O'Rourke wants to tell the stories is that it humanizes that. And, of course, we've learned over the years that the younger voters, especially the millennials, they want stories. They relate more to stories than facts and figures. And so in some respects, there were two different styles, whereas Ted Cruz is kind of like, if you will, giving you just kind of the basic information, almost like the epistles of the New Testament, whereas Representative O'Rourke wants to give you kind of the Gospels or the Old Testament, tell you the whole story behind it, And
right.
So there is a sense in
That's
which
a good analogy.
Those are two different individuals. Now, it seems to me that Representative O'Rourke thought that Ted Cruz had some very significant deficits, and one of those is you missed a lot of votes in the United States Senate. Now, I was waiting for that one to come because there's a very good reason. He was running for the presidency and
yes.
a few other things.
Yes.
And I thought that in this case, Senator Cruz came back with a really good answer. Hurricane Harvey, I was there. The shooting in Sutherland Springs, I was there. I was on the ground. I was on the ground.
Even though the liberal
media
media
a good answer to
maybe didn't cover it, yeah. Kerby. Maybe that's why other people don't know about it. He was there, but only those of us who are watching his social media feed got to find out about that.
And so I've always felt that Ted Cruz had a couple of negatives. One of those was that. Another one is, let's face it, when they talk about in television, the Q factor, likability. You got to, Representative O'Rourke is a likable kind of individual. Afterwards, he goes out to a Whataburger, and
he's in his car doing air drum and air guitar and singing to a song.
Before that, he's skateboarding in the car, parking lot. I mean, he's just a very likable person. That's always been a difficulty with Ted Cruz. But I think, he handled it as best as he's going to handle it, because most of the people are watching a debate to kind of get a sense of, okay, where do you stand? Do I feel good about the decision I'm about ready to make? Or for the few undecideds out there,
right?
are you going to convince me one way or the other? And so it wasn't like he was so stiff and a Mr. Spock Vulcan-like that people go, oh, I can't even relate to this guy.
Which live long and prosper. I'm a Trekkie, so I think that's a good comparison.
He overcame the two negatives there. In
Right.
just a minute, of course, we're going to talk about some of the negatives that obviously Representative
Right.
O'Rourke has to bring up. And that is he has a voting record both in the city council
Yes.
as well as in the House. And so we have a pretty good idea how he'd vote in the Senate. But anyway, I think as we finish that off, Ted Cruz handled himself very well. We expected him to do a good debate. We just wondered how he'd handle some of the negatives.
And I think that likability factor is huge. And I'm really glad you brought that up, Kerby, because here's the thing. If I'm voting for somebody for homecoming king or homecoming queen or head cheerleader or most popular, I'm going to expect a certain type of personality. I don't think that necessarily, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But in this case, I don't need Ted Cruz to be voted most popular. He is the most qualified, and he's proven it time and time again by his votes and him standing up for us here in Texas. I mean, look at all what did he say? 28 million people have moved to Texas, and he had a great quote about a U-Haul. I actually came across I thought he was enjoyable.
Right.
And again, I don't need somebody to have the it factor. If they have the it factor, go on America's Got Talent or, the X Factor or The Voice or one of those. Go on one of these popular, TV shows, American Idol. Go on. Is that even on anymore? I'm dating myself. But, then that's a different kind of likability factor. I need somebody who I can count on. I was talking with Senator Van Taylor, who's running for Congress the other day, and I said, what I've always liked about you, Senator, soon to be Congressman, is you are a low maintenance representative. I don't have to call you and tell you this is how my family wants you to vote on this issue. Senator Cruz, I know how he's going to vote on the issues, and I like his voting record, so I stand with him.
And again, when we come back from the break, I want to talk a little bit about how we pretty much can get a sense about how Representative O'Rourke would vote if he was Senator O'Rourke. And that I love doing that in front of her because
you're getting a reaction from me.
That we'd be talking about the former Senator Ted Cruz and Senator O'Rourke, and Kathy is ready to go fall on the floor here. But we will, after the break, talk about that because with some of these individuals, you really have a question mark. Quite frankly, when we had Senator Barack Obama, we had somewhat of a question mark of how he would actually be as the president.
Good point.
We had a pretty good guess, and everybody guessed right.
We were right, unfortunately.
You have a voting record, which I think is really striking. And so in some respects, Representative O'Rourke is going to have to live up with that. And what's so interesting is what he thinks is going to be winning with the people of the state of Texas. Maybe he's been in this progressive silo or echo chamber for too long. Some of the things he thinks are winning statements in the debate, I think just turned a lot of people off. Caused my wife to say, I'm starting to notice some of the people that used to have Beto signs taking them out of their yard. So we'll come back and talk back about those issues right after this.
There is no more dangerous time than when things are going well. Remember Elijah on Mount Carmel? Fire came down. There was no doubt who was God, but what happened next? He went from amazing faith to a time of great fear and depression. Many Christians have been very thankful a certain Democratic candidate for president was not the one to nominate two replacements for the Supreme Court. But as with Elijah, times of great victory are also times of great danger. Moments like this are not the time to take it easy. This is not the time to let our guard down. This is a time to double down on our work in the community, to serve and pray and plan and invest in a better future. This is the time to join Point of View's Truth Team 360 to make sure today's promising gains are not lost tomorrow. Show your commitment to our future by visiting pointofview.net/team or call 800-347-5151. Ask to join the Truth Team. Pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
You're listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Continue our conversation. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Or if you'd like to leave a note, again, we broadcast on Facebook Live. Some of you leave a note there. Also have a link to your particular website for JP, Kathy, and the crew. And we'll also do a link to your personal.
Kathy Partridge Ward. Yeah. You can always catch me on that. And
give you some
would
links.
love to talk to anybody who has comments, questions, any further discussion. Let's just keep the radio show going all day long.
Well, you're good at that. Now, where in the world is Nick Pitts? Because he always likes to tell us what day it is, and it is National Register to Vote Day.
Yes, it's National Voter Registration Day, because obviously October 9th that's coming up is the last day to vote, to be able, or to register to be able to vote in November 6th election. So those are real important dates. I think it's great that people are pushing that. I love it that my daughter, who is a registered voter, called me and she said, I just saw this come up on social media. Do I need to register to vote again? And I love it that, let's get some of the youth out there. Let's get them involved. And then our job is to educate them as to the facts and what's really going on and how their vote impacts them, and everybody's vote. So few people vote, and Kerby, you and I have talked about this before, that voter apathy.
Oh, I know.
Get out and vote.
There are some people I don't want to go out and vote if they don't know what they're talking about, and they cancel out your and my vote. So
the election is on November 7th.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about another one. Early voting, October 22nd.
Yes, right? Absolutely.
So let's get that one in there.
Key issue. And that's the thing. It is so easy to vote in our country. I think I've told you before, when I was pregnant with my son, it was a constitutional election voting day, and I needed to vote early because my son, his birthday's November 5th. I was right on the cusp of okay, and I remember I was bedridden that last month that I was pregnant with him, and I went out. I was vice chair of the Collin County GOP at that time, and I went to a library, called the number. They pulled the voter registration machine, or voter machine out to me. I voted. And then my doctor a couple of days later said, you did what? And I said, trust me, it would have stressed me out more to have thought that I was going to miss that vote. So it's super easy. You walk in, there are no lines. You go into an air-conditioned library, vote, exercise your right to vote, but be educated when you do so.
And again, we've talked about some people that not only vote early, but vote often. And so we're going to get into that issue. And
that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah, we did spend some time talking about the number of people. This is interesting because one organization, we spent some time talking about this in the book, have identified almost 1,700 people just in Florida that are registered in 2 different counties. And so you begin to realize, okay, people are double registered. People, of course, I've talked about this before because we've had with us fairly recently State Senator Don Huffines, who has identified all sorts of people that have voted illegally here in Dallas County.
Yes.
And these are just the self-identified individuals. I was talking yesterday with Judge Francis about the fact that when you go in for jury duty, one of the ways you can get out of jury duty is you can check that box, say I'm not a citizen. And so people would come in, check that box, and they go, wait a minute, you're not a citizen, but you just voted in the last election.
Exactly. How does this work?
Well, wasn't I not supposed to? and some of them since 1980 have been voting illegally. So
that's frightening.
If we have a close election, and let's be honest, I'll give people a preview. I don't think that any of the statewide races are going to be that close. Maybe Ken Paxton, don't think so.
Right.
But I do believe that this U.S. Senate race could be close, and even more so, some of these state representative races I've watched in Dallas and in Collin County are going to be close.
Yes.
So if indeed somebody gets elected because of an illegal vote, you're going to hear about it here on Point of View, because we just think this is outrageous that we haven't been able to maintain our voter rolls. So those are some really important issues. And again, a lot of that just because we started off by talking about what day it is. It's National Register to Vote Day. And I might just mention, for those of you that depend on us, yes, we are about ready to kind of revise the Point of View website. We have one where you can actually check to see if you are registered to vote.
I love it.
Your
I
daughter
love
could
it.
go ahead and put her name and say,
love it.
Yep, okay,
I'm
I'm
registered. It's good.
You know, it's amazing how many people say, I moved. Am I still registered? And go, you may not be. Let's go check this out here.
Well, because
and then we
especially
have all the voter guides.
in those local votes, like you mentioned, Kerby, it changes from who you're voting for, especially like in a primary, your precinct chairman. It changes who possibly you're voting for state representative, or down the ballot, justice of the peace, races like that, county commissioner. And those are all such crucial races because they make decisions about your day-to-day, everyday life. You've got to educate yourself before you get out to vote. So listen to Point of View, and you'll be educated.
And one of the things we do is we have a list, and when you click on there, we have a map of the country, and you click on your state, and then we give you all the voter guides. And you have a voter guide right now where we can do a comparison between the voting record of Ted Cruz and the voting record of Robert Francis O'Rourke.
Yes.
And so this isn't our bias. This is facts on abortion. One is pro-life, one is pro-abortion, right? And go through that list.
Well, and that, so this is one of those things. If people come out of the debate and they're still confused and they're still saying, I just don't know where to vote, or this is an issue that's important to me. I thought this was so great. Somebody captured, it's Faith and Freedom Coalition. Somebody captured a handful of the votes between Beto and Senator Cruz. Okay, so let's just go down these because these are things that are important to, I would imagine, the majority, anybody who's going to go vote. These would be key issues. Abortion on demand. Beto, yes. Senator Cruz, no. The Trump tax cut. Trump tax cut with Beto, no. With Senator Cruz, yes. Defund Planned Parenthood. Beto, no. Senator Cruz, yes. Obamacare. Beto, yes. Obamacare for Senator Cruz, no. Sanctuary cities, which is literally daily becoming a more and more important topic in our country. That's a whole nother. Okay, don't let me get off on a tangent, Kerby. Senator or Congressional Congressman O'Rourke voted yes in support of sanctuary cities. So that's yes for sanctuary cities. Senator Cruz, no.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of those, I was like, well, surely this will be the same. Beto for the $2,000 child tax credit was a no.
Yes. Isn't that amazing? and those all those issues, almost every one of those issues did come up in the debate. So if people were listening, they would pick that out. But if they say, oh, I don't want to listen to a 1-hour debate, and really you should as a citizen of America. But if you don't, just look at that, and we'll print some of those things up for people to find.
And here's the thing: it's cited where you can go in and you can check the date of the vote, when it was taken, all of this. So these are legitimate. Again, I know our country seems to be running on emotions, or at least that's what the liberal media shows us. But there are facts, and we can't ignore the facts.
And I think those are helpful because lots of times people say, well, you just don't like him, or he's a Democrat, or, he whatever, he played in a band, or his DUI. And, some of that did come up. By the way, we were talking about the negative that I thought Ted Cruz would be dealing with, and we dealt with that, his lack of voting on some very key issues. For sure, the negative for Beto O'Rourke is the DUI. And then the argument that, well, some said that you actually tried to flee the scene, and he said, I did not. And now people coming back saying, well, yes, you did until you were stopped. So that one, I think, has what we say in news, legs. I think it has some staying power. I think that comes up again. Don't you think?
I think it probably does. But again, I know people who have had DUIs, and then they've said, this was, thank the good Lord, I didn't hurt anybody.
Yeah, and I learned a lesson from it. Yes.
And then that's it. They stop at that. They say, I made a huge mistake, but here's the impact it's made in my life. He went into, and of course, since I knew I was going to be on your show, I took a page and a half of copious notes just for you, Kerby. But he mentioned that it was, and I felt like this was race baiting because he said, being a white man, I had an easier time of this than an African-American man would. And he went into and made this a racial issue.
Of course.
And I thought, why he should, if I were his people, I would have said, admit it, apologize for it,
and move on. But no, he wanted to use it.
He brought it into a race issue. That has nothing to do with the decision that he made. That has nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
So why bring that up?
Well, and again, why make a point about the fact, as we'll come back from the break, that Amber Geiger is white and the unfortunate individual that she shot is African American, well, actually Caribbean, but black.
Right.
You know, and this could have happened with a white guy in her apartment. It could have happened if it was a black officer. I don't think, a lot of people think race played a lot to do with it. Maybe it did. Don't know. But it isn't something that you would want to bring out as the most relevant fact about the fact that she stupidly went into, if you believe her story, and they have some questions about it, but if you believe her story, just went into the wrong apartment and was surprised and unfortunately pulled a trigger.
Right, which is a tragic, horrific thing that happened. And, God bless Botham Jean's family. But again, you go back into why was that something that Beto had to bring up right at the very beginning? Let's talk about the process. Let's talk about justice.
It's called changing the topic from DUI to race relations.
You've got it.
We'll be right back.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. A professor at Georgia State University has attempted to use a law once designed to curb the anonymity of the Ku Klux Klan to prevent a religious student from wearing a veil. Freshman Nabila Khan was surprised by her professor's request that she remove her niqab, a head covering and veil worn by some Muslim women as a part of their religious exercise. Khan wears her veil to her job and elsewhere, but her professor evidently thought it troubling enough to hand Khan a copy of the Georgia law disallowing masks that obscure the face when Khan declined to remove the veil. Georgia State University has explained the law to the professor and acknowledged the fact that veils are permitted on campus as a way to accommodate the free exercise of religion. You may be opposed to the idea that women should wear a niqab, but the principle is vitally important. If a state institution can marginalize one peaceful religious practice, it can act to marginalize the free exercise of any peaceful religious practice. And there's another important point to be made here as well. Georgia's governor has infamously vetoed a state's Religious Freedom Restoration Act, also known as RFRA. Khan's case presents one of the most routine examples of cases that benefit from a state's RFRA. Hopefully Governor Deal and the Georgia lawmakers can add that protection very soon. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Hi, I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. I hope you enjoyed this episode of First Liberty Briefing. You can learn more amazing stories about how everyday Americans are standing up and saving religious freedom. Just visit firstliberty.org. You'll be inspired, educated, and informed. Visit firstliberty.org right now.
Now, back to Point of View. your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes, and again, we have Kathy Ward in studio, and then we'll move on to some other topics in the next couple of hours. But, Kathy, one of the things I've talked about before is how, for certain individuals, they're in an echo chamber. That has been true, and it's been accused of conservatives. They're in their echo chamber. Everything they have on their Facebook page, only listen to Fox News, on and on and on. And that's, nobody denies that at all. But,
Okay.
Representative O'Rourke, it was like, he was making some statements that I think he's been able to get such applause when he's been in front of groups that love him.
Right.
So when he says abolish ICE, and everybody goes, yeah, yeah, yeah. When he says we need to ban the AR-15, yeah, yeah, yeah. And even some of the other comments you just were talking about just a few minutes ago, I think he was shocked that these, which he thought would be winning lines, we need more than prayer and thoughts, thoughts and prayers. And I thought, of course, Ted Cruz came back with a good response. But the bottom line
Yes,
in the midst of all of that, is I think he thought these were winning lines. And then when there were some boos, it registered on his face, didn't you think?
It's one of those things when you're in a debate, you need to have that, you've got to have that poker face on. You've got to be able to say, okay, game face, okay, because you're going to be hit hard. And it was like almost like he was taken aback when people booed, because I think
I've always gotten cheers when I said that.
Exactly.
Right, yeah.
And now he's in front. I mean, my goodness, when you're talking about prayers and thoughts, don't ever dismiss or diminish the importance of that to people. And I think he was surprised when he was met with people just vehemently booing him. It's almost like, wait, but that, like you said, that got really good applause.
Yeah.
A few weekends ago.
Because it's been a progressive line, and I've seen it in a lot of places, and I've seen it on some of the talk shows and everything. So in his world, the world is, well, he's watching CNBC or he's watching whatever, or he's reading various newspapers and he's going to rallies and everybody's cheering whenever he says that. Then you have a group. And again, let's face it, only partisans, either people really favorable for one candidate or another one in that room.
You heard that too. And I was like, that is a room where nobody is changing their vote.
Yeah.
They went in hardcore one way and they're coming out hardcore.
We understand that. I got that.
And that's the way it
goes. But still,
goes.
for the first time, you're hearing, "Whoa," and it's like, well, where'd that come from? And yet, again, if you're trying to win the state of Texas, and you've traveled to all of these different counties,
254.
You got that down. You ought to work for Representative O'Rourke. You got that down. But you also are meeting people at each one of those counties that sort of already like you anyway.
Right.
And the problem, I thought, for a while, even for Donald Trump, is, he's having these big rallies, but the people that come in the rallies like him.
Right.
So what does that that doesn't necessarily tell me that he's going to win the presidency, although it gave us a little bit of a hint. And the same thing, people say, look at all the people showing up for Representative O'Rourke's rallies.
Right.
Yes, and they're all cheering things that a lot of other Texans say, I'm not really feel so good about that. And when you keep coming up with these lines that, frankly, since I'm from California and I travel every year to New York, I know what it's like in New York and California and Vermont and places like that. Those are winning lines maybe there. They're not necessarily winning lines right here in the state of Texas, are they?
Especially in the state of Texas, Kerby. And I would venture to say all states in between New York and California, the majority of people, they want to be able to put food on the table for their family. They want to be able to go to church and not have anybody make fun of them for the church of their choice. They want to be able to protect their family. And I think that's crucial. And I think if you don't realize things like that, and another thing in Texas, we support our first responders. We support our military. We support our veterans. We support police officers. We support anybody who, when we're running away from danger, thank the good Lord, there are people who are willing to run towards it.
Yeah.
And that's just a part of Texas that you can't take out of Texas. So for you to make these comments about ICE and abolishing ICE, and I'll have to send you, I've got another great statistic on all of the illegals that have committed crimes, and it's just staggering. And then they're talking about the ICE officers who have put these bad guys away. So how can you be that out of touch with an entire state? And I think, and my 14-year-old son said it best. He said, Mom, he said, I think you get real riled up at the vocal minority.
Right.
And I was like, okay, 14-year-old child, that's a good statement, because it does get me incensed, and I'm, raising my fist in my car and all this kind of stuff when I hear something. But you've got to remember, we don't have, thank goodness we have shows like yours. Thank goodness we have shows like mine where you can talk intellectually or in a fun manner about the differences, and that's okay. And you can be educated on conservative issues, because we just don't have that from the liberal media. And we don't have that from social media. You have a lot of people who are very, very angry on social media. And is it the squeakiest wheel that gets the grease, or what's that saying? Is that what's happening in society? But I tell you what, I know people who aren't out there. They don't even have a yard sign in their yard. They're like, Kathy, I don't talk about it with my neighbors. I don't talk about it with my friends. But I know who they're voting for.
Yeah. And again, the real question, which in the last few minutes, let's talk about that. It is turnout.
Yes.
Because you see these polls,
yes.
And I've said, and I will say this probably to the last show I ever do on Point of View, that the only poll that really matters happens in November.
Amen,
but
my friend.
some polls are more accurate than others, and those polls that are more accurate than others are the ones that have a much better understanding of who is a likely voter.
Yes.
And that's why we've used over the years the Rasmussen poll nationally. And when I look at two polls, one say that Beto O'Rourke is ahead by a point, another that says that Ted Cruz is ahead by about 9 points.
Right.
And I look at the one where he's ahead by 9 points and look at the fact that they seem to have done some good interviews, personal interviews, and really asked some questions to determine whether or not you're going to vote. Because, you've walked precincts. I walk precincts.
Absolutely.
Matter of fact, I got to do it again. And you ask people, you're going to vote. Well, that's all I ask. But if you really ask question, well, did you vote in 2010?
Right.
Did you vote in 2014? Did you vote? Those are the questions you really want to start asking.
Did you vote in a non-presidential election?
Did you vote in 2016?
A lot of people don't.
And,
right.
and try to figure out
right.
if I see a pattern here. And so some of us now even have on our little phones, it shows how they voted.
Yes.
So we know a little bit more about that. But if I take seriously those where they've done, I think, a better job of estimating who's going to turn out, I think Ted Cruz is going to win.
Well, they're vetting their audience a little bit better, I think.
But it's back to the issue we just talked about.
Yes.
If you're not registered to vote and you're listening right now, go out and register to vote today.
Yes.
On National
Registration.
Vote. Yeah. And number two, then you need to go out and vote and get your like-minded friends to go out and vote. True?
Absolutely. Turn out your friends. Obviously, talk to your family, talk to your friends, talk to the people you go to church with, talk to, if you've still got, school-age kids, the parents who are like, oh, I think that's, you're really into politics. If somebody gives you an opening for discussing that. Colonel Allen West, just an amazing patriot. I was able to hear him speak the other night, and he talked about, talk to those friends of yours who have just moved in from California and say, do you like it here? You know what? Here's what you should like about us. No state income tax. This is why your business came to town. So there's so many positives. Get out there and talk about those positives. And in the case of this United States Senate race, show them a simple, hey, here's 5 or 6 key important issues.
And then how do you stand on them? Yeah.
Just look at this.
And that's at the top.
Yeah.
And I'll say my one last thing. We had a judge in here yesterday go all the way to the bottom.
Yes,
I think she's second from the bottom on the list in Dallas County. And they're really qualified people up and down the ballot. So learn about some of those judges, too, because they're going to affect your families and your rights and everything as well. Kathy Ward, always fun. Let's do it again.
Thank you so much. I would love to. Thank you so much.
You're going to be with us a week from Friday on our Truth Team, so we're looking forward to it. We'll take a break.
Excited.
Come back with more right after this.
Go mobile with Point of View and take transformation with you on the go. Search in Google Play or the Apple Store for Point of View Radio, the Point of View Radio mobile app. Download it free today.
Good news. You are not stuck with your health care plan. Really. You have a choice, and it's a great one. It's called MediShare, and if you've heard about it and wondered what exactly it is, it's a way that people share their health care bills. And these are people who have a common faith, who want to be part of something beautiful that not only meets their health care needs, but the needs of others too. And it's people who love to save money. Big time. Medishare members typically save $500 a month per family on their healthcare costs. That is a life changer for people. So this could be for you. Maybe it's what you've been looking for, a way to pay healthcare bills that's not only very smart financially, but it's even profound. Medishare is a nonprofit with 400,000 members nationwide who pray for and share with each other. So yes, you're not stuck. There's another way, and it could save you a lot. Find out more. Call 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, first of all, I think y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today here on Point of View. Yes, we'll certainly get into some of the stories that have been in the news. Matter of fact, later this hour, get into the presentation given last night by Brett Kavanaugh on Fox News, and then some of the new allegations against him. So there's certainly a lot that we will talk about. But, you know, as you well know, I, from time to time, really like to break this up because there's other things to talk about than just the one story that has dominated the headlines over the last 2 weeks. And one of those stories, which you can actually read about in National Geographic, and it's just a fascinating story for those of us that grew up in the medical field. My father worked as in the pharmaceutical area. My grandfather was a doctor. And this idea of a face plant is really just amazing, that you could transplant a face. In this case, we're talking about a 31-year-old woman who was declared legally and medically dead, and transplant that face onto a 21-year-old girl who has not had one. And we thought this would be, first of all, very interesting, but also more importantly, we have information on our website which will drive you back to the photo essay put together by our next guest, Maggie Steber, who is an internationally known documentary photographer. She's worked in about 68 different countries around the world and really done some incredible stories, oftentimes of underrepresented people. Probably best known for some of her photo essays and things like National Geographic and others. She's worked as a picture editor for the Associated Press and a contract photographer for Newsweek and director of photography at the Miami Herald. Her clients, as you might imagine, are groups like the National Geographic magazine, the New Yorker, New York Times Magazine, Aperture, and many, many others. And we have her full bio on the website, but also at least a picture or two and some story that I think you're going to find fascinating. And so, Maggie, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Well, hello. I'm so happy to have this opportunity to talk with you, and thanks for wanting to talk to me about this extraordinary story and the National Geographic, but more importantly, Katie Stubblefield, who is the young woman who received this face transplant.
And again, it's called The Face. And again, Katie Stubblefield, 21-year-old woman who became the youngest full-face transplant recipient in American history. And so I guess, first of all, the youngest to receive that, but also the first one in America. So can you give us a little bit of the background story to Katie?
Yes. Katie was 18, and she was a straight-A student. And a beautiful girl, very beautiful, both inside and out, but really quite a pretty girl, and very popular. And she was also a very thoughtful person. She valued loyalty and friendships. And her parents were spiritual people. And Katie also had a very wonderful and powerful relationship with her religious beliefs. But a few things happened all at once, and she just, I think, became overwhelmed. And that's really important to understand. It's never just one thing, but she fell into a deep depression, and she decided to take her own life. And she went to her brother's house because he had a rifle, and she tried to take her own life, and she failed, but she shot off the major portion of her face.
Yes.
And it was really quite a miracle that she survived.
And it is an amazing, because, again, we have available to people, if they want to click on it there, the photo essay. And I'll be honest, it's difficult to look at those pictures. But if nothing else, it just is a reminder of one more reason why we talk about just the fact that we're kind of miracles. Because just think of all the things that we do. You know, we smile, we wink, we open our eyes, we eat. That became very difficult for Katie, didn't it?
Yes, it did, because basically she blew off the major portion of her face, and that really, again, was a miracle that she survived. But the doctors took parts of the skin on her stomach and on her thigh, and they made what I call a piecemeal face. She ended up naming it Shrek.
Yes.
But it was very strange. So her eyes suddenly, instead of being parallel, where one was high and one was low, she had no nose. Her lips were to the side of the opening of her mouth. Anyway, you'd really have to see the pictures of her, because it's hard to describe a photograph. But they saved her by making her this temporary face. And it was really, that in itself was quite a miracle. But yes, so when she would eat, after this face was created for her, this piecemeal face, temporary face, she couldn't really eat very well. Food would fall out of her mouth because the lips were to the side, and it was just sort of this open cavity. And she couldn't see, she couldn't walk, she couldn't talk, but Katie is a miracle child. And this is the thing about her. She is an amazing person, just an amazing person. The doctor said she'll never do any of these things again. She began to walk. She tried to talk, and she started to see light and shadow. And this alone was so unexpected that the doctors really started to have faith in her. And so she became enrolled in this program at the Cleveland Clinic in Cleveland, Ohio, to prepare her to receive a new face if one became available. But it sounds like, oh, well, she shot her face up and they made this little face and then she got a new one. But actually, she underwent multiple surgeries on this little temporary face, always in very deep pain, constantly. And she also had to undergo a lot of therapy, psychotherapy, because she changed everybody's life in her family. And that alone is a really heavy weight to carry. But in order to become eligible for a face transplant, she had to go through all of these things. And the psychotherapy was probably one of the most important things, because you wouldn't want to give someone a face if they were going to try to take their lives again. And also imagine that you have somebody else's face for the rest of your life. So, and the face is such, we look at ourselves all the time. And so we identify by what we see in the mirror. But she also changed her parents' life, because they had to quit being teachers and just become full-time caregivers in this. But I have to say, they are the most remarkable people. The whole family is just amazing, just an amazing group of people. And that's such a privilege to meet people like that. And throughout the last 2.5 years, they have really let me become a part of their family and embraced me so much and shared so much with me. Very frank people. Yes. I mean, they talked very openly in front of me and the writer, Joanna Connors, who's written a remarkable story.
Let me jump in real quickly, and we'll talk a little bit more about the story. Of course, you can find the link there. Of course, those of you that already subscribe to National Geographic probably have seen or will see the story of the face. We'll continue our conversation with Maggie, because we have a lot more to cover, and we'll do so right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
You know, conspiracies have been around for centuries, but the internet has made it much easier to promote a conspiracy that has the potential of going viral before rational people can begin to tamp down the hysteria. The older conspiracies were presented and promoted primarily by people who believed the government wasn't telling the whole truth. The National Treasure series of movies and the television shows like The X-Files probably even fed into some of that skepticism. But the latest conspiracies are coming from the left, who apparently see Nazi symbols and white power symbols just about everywhere. Here are two examples. During the confirmation hearings for Judge Brett Kavanaugh, attorney Zinabash was sitting behind him. As a former law clerk for the judge, he was helping steer his nomination to the Supreme Court. Apparently, she has a tendency to rest her fingers on her arm in what could be best described as a reverse OK sign. One Twitter post complained that she was flashing a white power sign because they want to bring white supremacy to the Supreme Court. That post alone got more than 15,000 retweets. The internet uproar forced her husband to publicly defend Zina and point out that she is Jewish, Mexican-American, and the descendant of Holocaust survivors. Another series of examples is the number of times someone on the left sees Nazi symbols. One comedian asked a Twitter user, "Are you wearing a Nazi uniform?" The profile picture was actually of his father in an army uniform who was killed in Vietnam. A New York staffer was forced to resign when she accused a veteran who lost his legs in Afghanistan of being a Nazi because she assumed one of the tattoos was an Iron Cross when it was really a symbol for his platoon. The last few weeks have provided lots of examples of people on the left believing some bizarre conspiracies. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Universal 1440, Unbroken, Path to Redemption, the rest of World War II hero Louis Zamperini's true story, now playing, rated PG-13.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Maggie Steber with us for a few more minutes. Again, photojournalist who has done just an outstanding job of kind of telling the story, both in words and pictures, of what is called the face. And again, this is the story of Katie Stubblefield, 21-year-old woman, became the first and the youngest full-face transplant recipient in American history. And again, just an opportunity to look at just the incredible ability that we have today in the medical field. And Maggie, that is, again, something that you have covered and documented because you have pictures in the operating room and some of those actions. But again, just as even hard for me to imagine when I remember there was a film years ago came out called Face Off, and it had John Travolta and others. And the implication is they took a face off one person, they changed faces of individuals. I said, nah, that just can't happen because you have so many nerves, tendons, muscles, fibers. It is just amazing to me that doctors were able to take a face off of a 31-year-old woman who had died and put it on Katie and for it to function. Talk about some of the difficulties and some of the complications of the surgery.
Well, one of the things that the doctors did for a long time before, in preparation for this possibility of somebody donating a face, is that every other Monday night they would go to the cadaver lab at actually, it's one of my favorite things about the story. I know that sounds really dark, but I'm very interested in science, and this science is fascinating. But they would go to the cadaver lab, and they would practice by switching the faces on to cadavers. And these are people whose bodies were donated to science for just this sort of thing. And so there, by doing that, they knew where all the major veins were, where the nerves were, just all kinds of things. Even though this was not living flesh, they knew exactly where to look and that sort of thing. And Katie lost so much, including her teeth, and her tongue was injured. She still had the full tongue, but anyway, her upper palate was destroyed. And so they were really going to have to take a great deal of not just the surface of the face, but the tissue, the bones, the teeth,
yes,
all of these things. But they had practiced for a long time to do that, and there had been previous face transplants, not full face transplants, except for one or two at the Cleveland Clinic in Cleveland, Ohio. And so it wasn't a completely new thing, but she was the youngest one. And I want to make sure that we talk about something, so maybe I'll wait until you ask me the question. But in case you don't, could I mention one other thing?
Please do, because I don't want to lose anything. Go ahead.
Okay. So this science is very important for a very important reason, because some people thought of it as being very ghoulish. Some people made comments on the National Geographic Instagram feed where we post these pictures that were very unkind. But many more were sending their blessings and their love to Katie. But here's why it is so extraordinary, is that at this moment, the Department of Defense has given 2 very huge grants to the Cleveland Clinic and to NYU Hospital in New York, because they want to move forward this particular science, because so many of our military men and women are coming back from Afghanistan and some of these other wars with disfigured faces.
Sure, because of IEDs. Yeah, very true. Yes.
Right.
And shotgun wounds and all sorts of things. Yeah, I mean, this is just incredible that we're able to do that.
Yes, burn victims. There was a fireman in Mississippi or Tennessee, I can't remember. Anyway, his whole face was burned off. He has a new face now. People being shot in the face, But what was great about Katie is that so many of the service people coming back are younger, and she's young, and it's different because the body accepts the face in a different way than if you're older, and there's more probability. The body can reject the face even though you're taking these medications constantly. It can reject the face at any moment, and so they really learned a lot by Katie having done what she did in how to move the science forward, and it's going to benefit so many soldiers and so many burn victims, and so in a way she is a miracle child, and now she's very deeply religious, so she's a child of God, but she's a child of science, and I personally think that science is the language of God, and that this is how everything is explained, of all of the things he has created. And so it's a remarkable thing, really.
It really is. Just before I let you go, I did want to maybe have people obviously go to see the pictures, but talk about the future for Katie. What does it look like? Because I know there have been some complications and some other things, and of course it's been difficult on her parents, but give us kind of a prognosis for the future.
Katie is going to be a bright star. I'm sure of it, because she has a sense of humor. She's a lovely person. She's so brave, and as are her warrior parents, I must say. So Katie is determined to she's going to go to college. She's learning how to talk again, because now she has lips where she didn't before, and her tongue has been moved forward. She will have continuing surgeries to refine her face. She's starting to get some of her vision back. Who knows how much, but she's going to go to college, and she wants to become a counselor, and she wants to make her life mission to go around and tell young people not to do what she did and to tell her story. And she's already beginning to have these opportunities to tell her story. So that's going to be a really bright future. And I think Katie will save some lives, because just quickly, a few years ago, the Geographic did a story about the science of the teenage brain. And boy, that is worth finding and reading, because the teenage brain is not fully developed. And this is why teenagers do impetuous things, and because they they have a harder time making decisions. And that's what happened to Katie, and, well, she wants to make sure that other young people don't do what she did.
That prefrontal cortex is not well developed, and again, they're impetuous and impulsive, and of course, they're just all sorts of negative images that people have and all of the rest. So we know why the teen suicide rate has gone up so high, and I just think she's going to be just a great model and an encourager for young people to say, don't do what I did, learn from my lessons, and at the same time, maybe the success of her transplant will be able to change the lives of others that are burn victims, shotgun victims, gunshot victims, as well as those who've been blown up in IEDs and all sorts of things. They find themselves in situations that before we were never ever really able to treat, but now incredible story. So if people want to know a little bit more, we have a link to National Geographic. Of course, they can get the National Geographic magazine, and if they go through that, they'll see all the pictures and they'll read the story. And it is an incredible story, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And if I could just say one other thing quickly. Besides this story on science, we really hope that this story will encourage people to think about donating organs. You don't have to donate anything you don't want to. If you don't want to donate the face, that's probably the hardest thing to give for many reasons. But donations save multiple lives. Audria, the young woman whose face went to Katie, saved 8 lives with her donation of organs. And also, we really want to make sure that people understand that there's enormous cyberbullying right now, and especially in the teenage years, and that the rate of suicide among teenage boys and girls, 25% for teenage boys in the last 2 years, 70% for teenage girls. So we need to pay attention to our children and make sure that if they're being bullied, that they get help. And Katie will help shine a light on all of those things. And this story, and the Stubblefields were exceptionally generous in sharing their story with us.
Well, again, I thank you for taking the time to document this, and thank you for giving us some time today here on Point of View. We've got links to the website on pointofview.net and an opportunity for people to read and watch that story and to pass it on to others. So thank you so very much, Maggie, for joining us today here on Point of View.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm very grateful.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, again, let me encourage you to find a little bit more about the story of a face, and also it's available at our website, pointofview.net. But when we come back, of course, as I mentioned at the outset of the program, we'll get back into the news cycle. And last night, Judge Brett Kavanaugh was on with Martha McCallum at Fox News, and we've got a couple of articles that I want to put on the table. And if you have some comments about what we've learned, of course, we've had some other allegations. These just seem to mount every single day. And so because of that, Brett Kavanaugh wasn't going to wait until Thursday to get his opportunity to express his opinion in the court of public opinion. He did it last night. We'll talk about that right after this.
Go mobile with Point of View and take transformation with you on the go. Search in Google Play or the Apple Store for Point of View Radio, the Point of View Radio mobile app. Download it free today.
Good news. You are not stuck with your health care plan. Really. You have a choice, and it's a great one. It's called MediShare, and if you've heard about it and wondered what exactly it is, it's a way that people share their health care bills. And these are people who have a common faith, who want to be part of something beautiful that not only meets their healthcare needs, but the needs of others too. And it's people who love to save money big time. MediShare members typically save $500 a month per family on their healthcare costs. That is a life changer for people. So this could be for you. Maybe it's what you've been looking for, a way to pay healthcare bills that's not only very smart financially, but it's even profound. MediShare is a nonprofit with 400,000 members nationwide who pray for and share with each other. So yes, you're not stuck. There's another way, and it could save you a lot. Find out more. Call 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Perhaps some of you have actually seen the interview that was done last night by Judge Brett Kavanaugh as he appeared with Martha McCallum on Fox News. And if you already have some initial reaction, we'd love to hear from you. 1-800-351-1212. And a little bit later, we'll get into some other issues. But I posted a piece by David French, which I think is a good summary of it. And it's amazing how many times we come back to David French, but I appreciate that. And he points out that in some respects, he said that Brett Kavanaugh, Judge Kavanaugh, could have just played kind of a prevent defense. And if you've ever listened to various commentators on football, you know what that is. That's just trying to prevent another team from scoring. But he also understands that when we look at the fact that evidence is really so far in his favor, if indeed you believe in the presumption of innocence and innocent till proven guilty, there has been no real firsthand corroboration of some of the claims that have been made by these individuals. Okay, but that's not what he decided to do. Instead, he sort of decided, as he said, with his opponent facing the evidentiary equivalent of 4th and 20, he blitzed. He extended his denials into 3 very specific areas. So if you're taking some notes, and you might want to, or at least try to understand them in your head, he's really, in his presentation last night, said 3 very specific things which then could be subject to fact-checking. I will get to one of those in just a minute, by the way, because his former Yale roommate said something that might slightly disagree with his statement, but I think that's something we'll try to sort out. But here are the 3 points. Now, you can try to summarize a in-depth interview in a lot of ways, but if you're looking for 3 points, here they are. First, number 1. David French puts it this way. In the claim that's rocketing around the Twitter, he asserted that he was a virgin throughout high school and for many years afterwards. In a vacuum, the claim, he says, is hardly notable. After all, it's common for believing Christians to either wait for sex until marriage or to postpone sexual activity much longer than their peers. But in the context, it strongly contradicts the image of a lecherous wannabe rapist. So again, if indeed you accept that, and I do, because he said that with a straight face, and he said it with a great deal of conviction, coming from a Catholic background and all the circumstances he found himself in, that's point number 1. Point number 2, he denied ever drinking to the point of memory loss. He was never blackout drunk. And again, David French puts it this way. This is a crucial claim. If he had been blackout drunk, it's entirely possible that he could have engaged in sexual misconduct that he couldn't recall. In other words, Ford could tell the truth and Kavanaugh could be too wasted to remember his own misdeeds, but Kavanaugh forecloses the possibility. He claims that he has no memory gaps. Now, there is kind of an assault slightly on that today, because if you've been out there in the Twitter universe or even looking at news stories, there is a claim made by his freshman roommate who says they didn't really spend a lot of time together, first of all, which is interesting. I mean, I've been on the Yale campus as a graduate student, and I can't imagine how they wouldn't be together, because lots of times it's snowing outside, it's raining, but, you know, people do different things. People go to different rooms to study. They go to the library, Sterling Library to study, whatever. So I can understand maybe that's the case. But he said that he would be sort of an aggressive kind of drunk, which isn't the same as saying I was blackout drunk. So it's not like he's denying. He does deny that he was sexually involved with anybody in high school, but he doesn't deny that he didn't drink. So I don't know that that latest challenge is a big issue, but whatever. That's one that's out there right now, in which also his roommate is saying that I knew Ramirez, and she seemed like an honest sort of individual. And then the third point, he denied going to any parties in the area where Ford claimed the party took place. Again, this is a highly specific denial, David French says. he didn't just deny attending the party with Ford, he denied attending any party in the general area. And so that is certainly the case. So David French ends with this. He says, as the New York Times reported, the calendars Kavanaugh plans to produce to the Judiciary Committee show him out of town for much of the summer and don't show a party at the relevant location. Obviously, the calendars don't disprove Ford's claims, but they do show a man who kept meticulous records, and even then, and contemporaneous documentary evidence can help substantiate specific memories. It's to Kavanaugh's credit that he's not just trying to run out the clock. It's obvious that he's aggressively trying to clear his name, at least with anyone who still has an open mind. Next few days will be critical. Kavanaugh's a smart man, but he's smart enough to know that he's created 3 immense targets for investigative reporters and hostile witnesses. But he's also smart enough to know that when juries, judges, senators, and public are determining a witness's credibility, they don't just look to demeanor and apparent sincerity. They also look for specifics. And Kavanaugh is getting very specific indeed. So let me just mention that that particular article is on the website, and we'll give you a chance to maybe address that issue. If you'd like to join us, maybe you have some thoughts about Judge Kavanaugh, having seen him on television. If you did, of course, we'll have a chance, I believe, to see him on Thursday, although there's all the evidence in the world that that Thursday event will not take place. So we'll see where we go on this. The National Review also did, because of this, take on an issue, because they wanted to take on not only the first claim, but the second claim, the one we talked about yesterday, the claim with Deborah Ramirez. And they say, the editors say, the cynics, or perhaps more precisely the realists, believe that Democrats were playing for time in the hopes of finding another accusation against Brett Kavanaugh. The cynics were right. The New Yorker stooped to publish a shoddy story alleging that Kavanaugh exposed himself to a woman while he was at Yale. The alleged incident occurred at a drunken party when both were in their freshman year. What's extraordinary is that the woman making the charge, a fellow Yale student named Deborah Ramirez, admits that she hesitated to come forward because there were such gaps in her memory. As the magazine puts it, in her initial conversations with the New Yorker, she was reluctant to characterize Kavanaugh's role in the alleged incident with certainty. She only decided to talk, it says, after 6 days of carefully assessing her memories and consulting with her attorney. Even after her newfound certainty, which happens to accord with her political interest as a Democrat, her story contains certain gaps. As a matter of fact, we talked about, I think, 6 or 7 of them yesterday. She was drunk and didn't see that it was Kavanaugh who, and I'm not even going to finish the rest of the sentence, but did what she says it did. She says she heard someone yell out that it was Kavanaugh who done it, and she saw him make a motion upward and all the rest. And then the only other corroboration is an unidentified classmate who tells the magazine that he heard of the incident afterwards. In other words, more hearsay. Otherwise, the authors write, the New Yorker has not confirmed with other eyewitnesses that Kavanaugh was present at the party. Rather, something, if you've published a story that will contribute to an effort to destroy a man's reputation. And so, again, it goes into some real questions about what this really means. And so at the end, they say the New Yorker story comes on the heels of another blow to the credibility of Christine Blasey Ford's account. She has identified 4 other people who were present at the high school party where Kavanaugh allegedly assaulted her as a teenager. All have denied it, and now including Leland Kaiser, who is a long-time friend of Ford's and a Democrat. She told the Judiciary Committee through her lawyers, simply put, Ms. Kaiser does not know Mr. Kavanaugh. She has no recollection of ever being at a party or a gathering where he was present with or without Dr. Ford. And so the conclusion that you have here from the editors is clearly the opposition to Kavanaugh hopes that the 2 stories, with perhaps more on the way, will support each other despite their inherent weaknesses. If Democrats take down Kavanaugh on the basis of these charges, they will have achieved the miraculous by stopping a Supreme Court nominee with 2 unproven, and probably unprovable charges in a smashing victory for what they call garbage pail politics. Brett Kavanaugh is an excellent jurist who has earned his sterling reputation over the decades of public service. If his career is going to be ruined and his reputation besmirched, it should require clear and convincing evidence. We're willing to follow the facts wherever they lead, but so far they lead only to the belief that this is a disgraceful episode that makes Borking look above board and responsible by comparison. And so, again, just imagine a little bit of what it's like for Brett Kavanaugh and his wife right now and some of the struggles that they have faced. Of course, people have also talked about some of the reactions to Christine Blasey Ford's. And I, in the first hour, when we were doing a local show, mentioned something else that happened to Senator Ted Cruz and his wife Heidi Cruz. They were confronted at a restaurant, and if you've not seen the videos, you can see that just a night out with your wife, not something you can do either, because as they were shouting, "You've been friends with Kavanaugh for decades," that's enough to interrupt his dinner at a restaurant. We'll be back right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. A professor at Georgia State University has attempted to use a law once designed to curb the anonymity of the Ku Klux Klan to prevent a religious student from wearing a veil. Freshman Nabila Khan was surprised by her professor's request that she remove her niqab, a head covering and veil worn by some Muslim women as a part of their religious exercise. Khan wears her veil to her job and elsewhere, but her professor evidently thought it troubling enough to hand Khan a copy of the Georgia law disallowing masks that obscure the face when Khan declined to remove the veil. Georgia State University has explained the law to the professor and acknowledged the fact that veils are permitted on campus as a way to accommodate the free exercise of religion. You may be opposed to the idea that women should wear a niqab, but the principle is vitally important. If a state institution can marginalize one peaceful religious practice, it can act to marginalize the free exercise of any peaceful religious practice. And there's another important point to be made here as well. Georgia's governor has infamously vetoed a state's Religious Freedom Restoration Act, also known as RFRA. Khan's case presents one of the most routine examples of cases that benefit from a state's RFRA. Hopefully Governor Deal and the Georgia lawmakers can add that protection very soon. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Hi, I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. I hope you enjoyed this episode of First Liberty Briefing. You can learn more amazing stories about how everyday Americans are standing up and saving religious freedom. Just visit firstliberty.org. You'll be inspired, educated, and informed. Visit firstliberty.org right now.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Next hour, we're going to have Raymond Harris in studio with us. We're going to be talking about his new book, Business by Design, Applying God's Wisdom for True Success. We've had him in the program before and on the program talking about his earlier book, The Heart of Business, Solomon's Wisdom for Success in Any Economy, and certainly have benefited so much for the writing and work that Raymond Harris has done. So I'm looking forward to having him in studio and learning a little bit more about how to apply biblical principles to these areas. I wasn't really planning on talking about the Ted Cruz story, but let me, since I did, also follow up and say that his opponent, who is Representative Robert O'Rourke, oftentimes known as Beto O'Rourke, actually did tweet that that is not the way that you should treat any family member. And so I do appreciate the fact that he has done that. And we can disagree without being disagreeable, but what has happened is that various individuals, as I've said in my commentary last week and in another commentary coming out tomorrow, there's become a difference between liberals and leftists. Liberals would say, okay, we can disagree, but I'll defend the right of you to disagree with me, and we'll have a robust debate about free speech. But the leftist idea, which is sort of taking over more and more of liberalism and even the Democratic Party, says, no, you don't have a right to those views at all. As a matter of fact, certain kind of speech is considered hate speech, and because you're a hateful person, I can do anything I want to you in public at any time, anywhere. And it's becoming more and more difficult, if you think about this, for individuals. Those of you in Florida see what happened to the Attorney General Pam Bondi. Goes to Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood premiere and is shouted down. And, of course, we've talked about Charlie Kirk and his associate had water thrown in his face, and they were trying to provoke something there as well. Glenn Beck on an airplane had people challenging him. And, oh, by the way, Sarah Huckabee Sanders can't even eat in a restaurant. Now apparently Ted Cruz and Heidi Cruz can't as well. So there are just all sorts of concerns about the growing animosity and, if you will, civil war of words. And right now, fortunately, it's not violent, although with Antifa it is, but it could get a lot worse real quickly if we can't tamp down some of the emotions and the reactions. So I'd love to get your thoughts. 1-800-351-1212. And in just a minute, after taking a call or two, I do want to at least alert you to another article I've posted, and this one is very well written. The Kavanaugh circus could destroy the Me Too movement. And that's another issue, because we have taken seriously the fact that there are individuals, women in particular, but not exclusively women, who have been abused by people in power. It has happened in the political realm, it has happened in the entertainment realm, in the media, it has happened in the church. But when now you have individuals coming forward making claims that may or may not be true, this whole circus, as this particular writer, she's a woman, could say, might actually begin to destroy the Me Too movement. It's the old story that you learned as a kid. If you cry wolf enough times, people no longer believe there's a wolf. And we have already talked about the fact that there have been false allegations of rape. There have been false allegations of racism. And that very significantly dilutes and diminishes the very real claims of racism or rape or a variety of other issues. But let's, if we can, get a few phone calls from you. We'll go to Georgia first on the Good News Network. Jonathan, what's your point of view?
Hey, Kerby, how are you doing today?
Very good.
Good to hear, good to hear. I had a comment regarding Judge Brett Kavanaugh's the ordeal he's going through right now.
Sure.
First off, I highly respect the man for standing up for himself and you know, being so open and to deny it openly and you know, give the opportunity to prove him wrong and all that stuff. It just shows his character and makes me really comfortable for him to go on our nation's highest court. Obviously not the highest court, you know, God sits on that court, but
yes,
you know, I really respect the man already. But one comment I had regarding all of the accusations against him was regarding that there's lots that are quick to make statements and accusations and spread that around. And I'd argue that most of America has heard at least one of those accusations, and I believe they will be proven true. But when and if they're proven untrue, not true. I don't believe that there's going to be near as many that are saying, "Oh, actually, you know, we need to redact that we're wrong." and it's a sermon I remembered from Ravi Zacharias. I can't remember who he was talking about specifically, but the question raises, you know, who's going to clear my name? Who's going to give me my reputation back?
Right.
Because the repetition of just, you know, this and that, and it's mostly sounds like not true. if any of it's true. It's just, the man's name has been smeared, and who's going to clear that?
Yeah, and again, we've talked about that, because if indeed he is guilty, then I think you are going to have people that are going to be so upset with Brett Kavanaugh saying, you knew this was true, you denied it, you have served on very high courts, including now the D.C. Circuit Court. You almost came on the Supreme Court when you knew it was a lie. We would be upset with him for very good reasons. On the other hand, if we found that all of those charges are innocent, we would be upset with these other people saying, look, obviously something has happened to Christina Ford, and we recognize that Christine Ford has had something, and someone did something, but it turned out not to be him. And then, of course, we've had the argument that Deborah Ramirez said that somebody did something to her, but she wasn't even sure it was him. You want to be fair, but at the same time, you'd have to say we don't have corroborating evidence for that. So I don't know. I mean, it's so difficult, and I just feel for their family, because even if all of this is true, and I don't think that it is, but even if it is, this happened so long ago. We're talking about something that happened in high school. I don't even give a lot of credence to the one in Yale because of all the holes in the testimony. But even if that happened, we are talking about, in one case, a 17-year-old, another case, maybe an 18-year-old, doing something stupid and holding them accountable for that after a sterling record of service in all of these years with no other allegations. And that's something to think about. But let me take at least one more phone call here in Texas. KCTA. Joanne, what would you like to add to our conversation?
Hi. Yes, I just wanted to say that I did watch the interview last night on the story. And first of all, I just wanted to say that I really feel like that Brett Kavanaugh is man enough that he would have stood up and said, yes, I did do this, I'm sorry, and he would not just let this continue to go on and torture himself and his family. But the main reason I was calling was because I was reading my Bible this morning, and I was reading Psalm 35, where David was just crying out to the Lord for vengeance from his enemies who were accusing him of all sorts of things that he did not do. I thought this is a perfect psalm for Brett Kavanaugh right now.
I would think so. I wish I had a little more time to take the rest of the phone calls. We're going to move on in the next hour to Raymond Harris. He's going to be in studio with us talking about his new book, Business by Design. It has been endorsed by just kind of a who's who of all sorts of people in the Christian world, and we've certainly benefited over the years with some of the writings and even his own experience. If you've seen the film, for example, I can only imagine. He is the chairman of the board of the Irwin Brothers Entertainment, and that film, as well as many others, are ones he's been involved with, as well, of course, as an architect who has built so many Walmarts around the country. So we're going to have a chance to chat with him, and I'm sure tomorrow we'll get back to this whole issue of Brett Kavanaugh in our Millennial Roundtable. In the meantime, you can read a few of the articles we've posted and encourage you to find those on our website, pointofview.net. We'll be back right after this.
There is no more dangerous time than when things are going well. Remember Elijah on Mount Carmel? Fire came down. There was no doubt who was God, but what happened next? He went from amazing faith to a time of great fear and depression. Many Christians have been very thankful a certain Democratic candidate for president was not the one to nominate two replacements for the Supreme Court. But as with Elijah, times of great victory are also times of great danger. Moments like this are not the time to take it easy. This is not the time to let our guard down. This is a time to double down on our work in the community, to serve and pray and plan and invest in a better future. This is the time to join Point of View's Truth Team 360 to make sure today's promising gains are not lost tomorrow. Show your commitment to our future by visiting pointofview.net/team or call 800-347-5151. Ask to join the Truth Team. Pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining us today here on Point of View. We're going to be talking this hour with our good friend Raymond Harris. He's been on the program with us before. Matter of fact, those of you watching online, I might pull out one of the earlier books, The Heart of Business. That's when I first met you. Solomon's Wisdom for Success in Any Economy. As you can see, I still read it and benefit from it, have marked it, have used it. And this new book, I first of all had a chance to see it in a manuscript form, The Business by Design, 200 pages. And I'm not the only one. As I go through here, it's a virtual who's who of all sorts of people we've interviewed over the years that have endorsed the book. 200 pages, Broad Street. And if you're not familiar with Raymond Harris, he's a practicing architect, but also an author, an executive movie producer. We're going to talk about more of that in just a minute. And, of course, he established one of the most prolific American architectural firms, a graduate of the University of Oklahoma, first in your class there in the College of Architecture, and chairman of the board, for example, of the Irwin Brothers Entertainment, which gets us back to the movies. And, of course, you've been on the board in the past of Crown Financial, Pine Cove. I've been on that board as well. And Raymond Harris, just always great to have you with us, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Kerby. It's a privilege to be here. Thank you.
You are an architect, but that is so limiting in terms of all the other things that you have done. And I even this week was sharing your story with somebody who said, you know, I've been in business for years, and in the past I was in ministry, and I'd like to get into ministry again, but I'm thinking that maybe I can use my business to do ministry. And I said, well, let me get you a copy of Raymond Harris's book, because that's kind of what you have done. Let's, if we can, tell one of the stories right off the bat, and that is a lot of people have said, well, how were you so successful? And you were making a drive up there to find out a little bit about Walmart, and tell us that story, because it's just a fascinating story.
Well, a year before that, I was asked to do a project for a contractor, and this contractor was doing a kind of what we would call a scruffy little addition to a store, and so I did it, and no one really knew the importance of that. I don't think I realized the importance of that at the time, but it was for a small retailer by the name of Walmart. And so they had asked me to come up to talk to them about possibly doing more work. And so Mary Dell and I drove up one rainy morning and pulled up to the Walmart headquarters, which was a metal building, and went inside, and they had seen the value of what I'd done for them on their small project and asked me to do more work for them. So that's where it started.
Yeah. And I remember when I meet you, you had already done some of the Walmarts, and in this book you talk about where one of the buildings didn't go so well, and just how, again, you had done your due diligence and really tried to apply your biblical principles in your business, which I just commend you for. And so I've heard that story, but I never heard how it began. And really, when you're driving up there, you're wondering, is there even a chance that I'm going to tie into Walmart? And, of course, the rest of the story is that at one time you were one of the most significant architectural firms in the country, if I remember right.
Well, we did a lot of work, probably not in the design, because no one would claim Walmart to be a fantastic design.
Yeah.
But we're, from a standpoint of being prolific, we've done about 8,000 projects for Walmart over a 30-year period. And we've worked, what's interesting is that we've worked in almost every municipality.
Yes.
If you have a Walmart in your town, we probably have been there either to remodel the store or to build it. And so we've worked in all the states, most municipalities. And I ask people every now and then, as kind of a fun thing, is if they've been in one of our buildings, and have yet to find an American that hadn't been in a project that we've either designed or remodeled.
That is just amazing. Let's get back into kind of the theory of the book here, and there's 27 chapters, so there's just a lot of material. We will do our best to do justice, but you really talk about two economies, and this is one of the things I want our listeners to think about. We find ourselves in the world, and most of us work, and that's where we spend a lot of our time. And then we go to church, and sometimes we try to figure out what's the connection between church and our workaday world. And you really talk about the fact that we have an inherent tension between those two economies, right?
Yes. Not everything in the world is bad, but everything in God's economy is actually good. And I think that we've had a tendency of segregating the secular and the holy. And I don't think in God's kingdom and God's economy, we should segregate it. I look at it much like when I was a kid, my mom would put mashed potatoes on my plate with peas and carrots, and I would just mix them all up, and then I would eat it together. And I think that our lives should be like the mashed potatoes, peas, and carrots all mixed up. So when we go to church, it shouldn't be segmented or segregated, I should say, from what we do at work. Yes. I think it's all the same.
And we've had Christian Overman on and all sorts of other people that talk about the fact that we have kind of a sacred secular dichotomy that has existed in the past. It seems to exist here. And I think part of the problem is that when we have people in the ministry, sometimes they've never been in business. We have people in business, maybe haven't done theology, and so the two never meet. And I know years ago when even at Pro Ministries we published this newsletter was called Spiritual Fitness in Business. They had done a linguistic analysis of the kind of words and phrases used in a church, and then the kind of linguistic analysis of what happens in a boardroom, and the two just never even overlap. And so what we have to do is create a sense in which the two worlds come together, and really to, in a sense, to use a theological term, really have the lordship of Christ extend over every area. And so having been in the business world, but also having thought about this from a Christian point of view, you really see that we have to make an intentional connection between the two, don't we?
Yes, I totally agree with that. I think if you go back to what Jesus really taught, I don't think the principles apply to business or to ministry. They apply to both. And I think if you look at it from the standpoint of what was Jesus really trying to communicate with us, it was really his kingdom. And his kingdom isn't segregated between business, because everything that he talked about applies to business, but it's also everything is ministry. And so I think that the businessman should have the ultimate goal of serving the Lord and sharing the gospel through how he performs and how he works. I think ministry folks should look at business as an opportunity to be an economic engine to help them to do the very same thing.
Yes, and again, we want to talk a little bit about this issue of profits and certainly character and biblical principles, but also somewhere along the line, I want you to tell the story about how you got together with these two guys, the Irwin brothers, because anybody that's ever seen the most recent film, I can only imagine, know that your name shows up on the screen there, and you've been involved in that. It's a fun story there as well. So we've got a lot to cover. It, as I said before, is a book that I would really want to put in the hands of all of you. Whether you're in the business world or not, we all work and we all do things toward the glory of God. And so this book called Business by Design, Applying God's Wisdom for True Success, is something we are promoting today on the website. You can click on the picture there of Raymond Harris. You can click on the picture of the book, and you can get it, I think, both in paperback and Kindle, and also have a link to the website. So there's some great material that we're going to try to cover in the next hour. But again, there is no way we'll cover all 27 chapters, not even going to try. But as we do so, hope this will encourage you to get a copy of the book, maybe get two, one for you and one to pass on to somebody that might need to hear some of these principles. And even as I've been talking about this, we love our pastors, but sometimes pastors could learn from some of these principles, because maybe they'd begin to read this and say, you know, I need to put that in a sermon so that I can really begin to relate what we're learning in God's Word to what happens in everybody's everyday experience. So we'll take a break, come back with more right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
You know, conspiracies have been around for centuries, but the internet has made it much easier to promote a conspiracy that has the potential of going viral before rational people can begin to tamp down the hysteria. The older conspiracies were presented and promoted primarily by people who believed the government wasn't telling the whole truth. The National Treasure series of movies and the television shows like The X-Files probably even fed into some of that skepticism. But the latest conspiracies are coming from the left, who apparently see Nazi symbols and white power symbols just about everywhere. Here are two examples. During the confirmation hearings for Judge Brett Kavanaugh, attorney Zinabash was sitting behind him. As a former law clerk for the judge, she was helping steer his nomination to the Supreme Court. Apparently, she has a tendency to rest her fingers on her arm in what could be best described as a reverse OK sign. One Twitter post complained that she was flashing a white power sign because they want to bring white supremacy to the Supreme Court. That post alone got more than 15,000 retweets. The internet uproar forced her husband to publicly defend Zina and point out that she is Jewish, Mexican-American, and the descendant of Holocaust survivors. Another series of examples is the number of times someone on the left sees Nazi symbols. One comedian asked a Twitter user, "Are you wearing a Nazi uniform?" The profile picture was actually of his father in an army uniform who was killed in Vietnam. A New York staffer was forced to resign when she accused a veteran who lost his legs in Afghanistan of being a Nazi because she assumed one of the tattoos was an Iron Cross when it was really a symbol for his platoon. The last few weeks have provided lots of examples of people on the left believing some bizarre conspiracies. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
From Universal 1440, Unbroken, Path to Redemption, the rest of World War II hero Louis Zamperini's true story, now playing, rated PG-13.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Raymond Harris in studio with us today. Let me just mention, too, that we also have a link to his website that mentions his previous book, The Heart of Business, Solomon's Wisdom for Success in Any Economy. I really recommend both books. This book's been on my shelf, and you can see that it's been worn. Maybe not as worn as my Bible, but I do benefit tremendously from Raymond Harris. And there's a video there, which, interesting enough, the Irwin brothers produced, so you can actually watch a video there. But this new book called Business by Design, you actually have a Business by Design website. And, of course, we also have a link if people want to just order it online, because there's a way you can get it either in paperback or Kindle. It might show up in your bookstore, and I'm certainly a firm believer in buying books in your bookstore, but it's so new that you probably want to order it online right now until they get their copies. I did mention profit in just a minute. That is something to think about, because you have used the profits and the resources God has placed in your hand to not only promote, we'll talk about the Irwin brothers in just a minute, but mission outreach in Africa. And I could go through this very long list of organizations you've been on the board with over these years, OMF, for example, and others. And so that's something to really get our people that are listening right now working in the business world to consider, because even as you are making a profit, even as you are raising funds, you can be involved in ministry, can't you?
Absolutely. I think that's one of the chief purposes of the business person, is to make profit. If we don't, we're not going to be sustainable.
Right.
And I've really thought a lot about what is the use of profit. I think first it's to take care of your family. Secondly, to take care of your employment family, the people that are helping you make that profit. Third is to take care of the company that you're working with, because that becomes the economic engine that supplies a profit for both you and your family. And then as I really thought, what do you do with the extra? And do you consume it? And I thought, that's not what God would want me to do, is consume everything I make. So what do you do with it? And I came to the conclusion that it's an economic engine to take care of those that can't take care of themselves.
And I just think that is just an outstanding opportunity for you to invest in God's kingdom, basically.
Absolutely.
And those are the best return on investment, as I say. One of the things I like about this is that all through your book, you will have like a biblical principle and then a business concept. And this is where I think your book provides a lot of good connection points. There are, as I've said before, pastors who would like to make those connections, but they sometimes haven't thought it through. And I've jokingly said that lots of times when I've taught at Dallas Seminary, they say, you're really good at application. Well, then, Raymond, think this through. I have been in churches, and I mean not my current church, but I've been in churches where I've heard a great sermon. I've walked out and I thought, I have not a clue as to how to apply anything I've just heard from the pulpit. So sometimes the connection between those biblical principles and the business concepts are really key, aren't they?
Yes, they are. As I have a hard time remembering sometimes things I hear unless I can put a hook on it. And one of the things I noticed how Jesus taught is he always taught with examples, he taught with word pictures, and he taught with stories. And I thought it would be easier to remember a concept if you could remember the story and then the concept would come back.
Right.
And so the biblical principles are something that Jesus might have said, but the concepts are really a one-word application of that. And so I love the way that Jesus taught so that the child could understand, but yet the most experienced theologian would be confounded by that. And I love that, the genius of how Jesus taught. So I tried to emulate how Jesus taught by using stories and word pictures and to really illustrate the concepts and thus the biblical principles that he shared.
And one of the things you have is, you talk about some of the principles and how it relates to deference and preference and inverse reality, as well as things like humility and service. I love your one on service. Every time I go into the restroom over here, I make sure I pick up all, because the men are just messy people, and I found out you're the same kind of person. If there's any paper towels on the floor or anything, you clean things up and everything. And that is something you've been doing. And then you notice that when you set the example, then other people follow it as well. And so you just got some great stories here to just illustrate that, that helps also with the issue of humility, too. And
that's
you clean
right.
up the restroom, right?
I think, a humble person fights arrogance and pride. That's why we try to be humble. And one of the things that I thought would show real humility is to go in and service people when they're not looking and then not get any credit for what you did. And when you go into the bathroom, you certainly don't want to pick up the paper towels in front of people because they're going to think you're pretty weird. But if you can kind of sneak in there and clean up, then you're serving people without getting credit, and the Lord sees that. So.
And another story about your partner when you were trying to develop an auditorium in Africa, and you were having trouble with your interns. Now, we've had interns here. We've never had this problem, so this is just this is hypothetical. But you were having trouble with these interns not working extra hours because you were kind of getting them to do it, I think, pro bono.
Pro bono, yeah.
And so you had complained, I guess, to one of your partners, and you come in on Monday, and it's all developed. Tell that story.
Yeah, I have a great partner, Shado Quinn, listens to me a lot of times, and one Friday afternoon, I was really kind of disappointed because I had presented a project to a number of interns in the firm as kind of an extra credit thing in our firm. It was pro bono work. You'd have to do it after hours or on the weekend, and it was really a cool project in Africa to build an auditorium for a bunch of orphans.
Yes.
And they just didn't seem to take the bait and didn't seem to understand what I was asking them to do. And I was just sharing Friday afternoon with Shade about how I was a little bit frustrated and disappointed that they hadn't taken the bait and provided this service. And I went home and shared with my wife, Mary Dell, a little bit about the frustration. Came in Monday morning, and on an easel in my office was a beautifully designed auditorium with a rendering. And that showed that my partner really cared about me and served me, but not only me, but for orphans. And so tens of thousands of orphans have been in this building now that he did over a weekend. And he did it without fanfare. He didn't get credit for it. He just did it out of service. It was pretty sweet. It was a sweet, sweet thing.
Well, again, just before we take a break, I got to tell the story about the Irwin brothers because we've all benefited from their movies. And in one of your chapters here, you talk about contract negotiations with young filmmakers.
Yep.
And I know you're a humble guy, but you got to tell the whole story because it really is an incredible story because they're needing money. They need your investment. And you put in front of them something that the lawyers and everybody looked around like, did we just hear what he said? So explain the whole story.
Well,
if you might.
I had met John and Andy Irwin earlier, and they did some work making short films that Mary Dell and I had invested in and did such an excellent job. They did it fast, they did it well, and they did it economically. And you can't have better than that combination. So as they wanted to enter into the film business and do feature-length films, they approached Mary Dell and me to become partners with them in the first film. So we did. And we made a film. And but as young filmmakers, they make great films, but then distribution is really a problem. Advertising and distribution are key to the film business. And so we were stuck. We had a great film, but no one to distribute it yet. And so time was waning, money was getting tight, and so they came to us and they said, "Would you loan us, or would you invest in us? What we would like is to borrow money. We'll give you 50% of our company and give you a 20% interest rate." And I'm sitting there listening to that in the conference room with my lawyer and with theirs, as we were trying to negotiate how to help them. And I said, guys, that doesn't seem like a very good deal if that were me on your side of the table. So I offered them something totally different. I offered them a 5% note with no ownership and gave them 5 years to pay it back. And that seemed to be the runway that the Irwin brothers needed to get started making wonderful movies.
And again, I love in the book there, it says, finally broke the silence. What do you think? Because, you said that, and it was like the A.F. Hutton commercial. Everybody looks around like, what? And it said, well, the lawyer said, well, I like it, of course, at least the first part. I'm still waiting to hear the hook. They were sure that the other shoe was ready to drop. But that's what they needed to launch. And again, that is a biblical principle that put yourself in the other person's position. It's called the Golden Rule, so it's not just found in Scripture, but it certainly is found in Scripture. It's just one of the illustrations. The Golden Rule expressed through love, the selfless love of Jesus, and that's just one of many chapters. And when we come back, we'll get into a couple of other chapters. We're talking about issues ranging from righteousness and faithfulness and shepherding and leading by example. Of course, we've already talked a little bit about generosity and forgiveness and reconciliation. So if you'd like to join us, of course, you can do so, 1-800-351-1212. If not, sit back, take some notes. Most importantly, I hope you'll visit the website. We've given you a couple of places where you can get a copy of the book. And Raymond Harris is in studio with us as we talk about his new book, Business by Design. But, of course, you've also heard me promote his earlier book, The Heart of Business. Matter of fact, I was just with somebody who said, oh, I know that book. I'm going to go get this book right now. So we'll be back right after this.
Go mobile with Point of View and take transformation with you on the go. Search in Google Play or the Apple Store for Point of View Radio, the Point of View Radio mobile app. Download it free today.
Good news. You are not stuck with your health care plan. Really. You have a choice, and it's a great one. It's called MediShare, and if you've heard about it and wondered what exactly it is, it's a way that people share their health care bills. And these are people who have a common faith, who want to be part of something beautiful that not only meets their healthcare needs, but the needs of others too. And it's people who love to save money, big time. MediShare members typically save $500 a month per family on their healthcare costs. That is a life changer for people. So this could be for you. Maybe it's what you've been looking for, a way to pay healthcare bills that's not only very smart financially, but it's even profound. MediShare is a nonprofit with 400,000 members nationwide who pray for and share with each other. So yes, you're not stuck. There's another way, and it could save you a lot. Find out more. Call 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Raymond Harris in studio with us today. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212, or just sit back talking about his new book, Business by Design, 200 pages, Broad Street. You can find out more by going to our website, pointofview.net. Our call has a great material about him and about his company and the rest. But one of the issues, Raymond, I wanted to get into is character, because you have kind of a funnel talking about character and principles. And Chapter 5 talks about developing righteous character. Who are we to become? One of the things I loved about that is remind me a little bit of some of the book in Heart of Business, because anybody that has ever read Heart of Business, you have a section on seek these things, do these things, develop these things, avoid these things, and become these things, the characteristics. And so you can see I really indeed enjoy Raymond Harris, but this idea of righteous character is going to be important, because there's nothing in the business world saying you need to be humble, honest, be a person of integrity, righteous, although we admire that. And certainly righteous character is something important in our Christian growth. How does that relate to the idea of doing and becoming? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think the end goal of men and women in God's kingdom is to develop righteous character. I think it all boils down to all the characteristics of a good man and woman are righteousness, because God is righteous. And I tried to figure out, how do you develop righteous character? And I came to the conclusion that you do certain things to become, and you become certain things because you do them. And it becomes kind of a cycle. It's almost a flywheel. And it's like, which came first, the chicken or the egg? And I don't know, but I think that you become a righteous person by doing, but you do these things because you are righteous. And as I thought, what is important for eternity? What can you take with you? And you can't take your possessions. You can't take things you built on earth. What can you take to heaven? And I think that you can take your righteous character carried in your heart. And I think that's what we throw at the feet of Jesus.
I think so. You know, one of the things I thought was really helpful about this chapter is what you have mile markers of righteous character. Those of us a little bit older remember all the various mile markers. Now you don't find those as much, but, you know, mile markers, I'll just mention a few. Seeking God's kingdom, and money should not be our master. Of course, we certainly can relate to that. Storing treasures in heaven, persecution of the righteous, the epic battle between love and hate. And really, there's a sense in which, as you said, sometimes you have to do it to be it. Sometimes if you don't necessarily feel it, like I don't want to maybe go and do my devotions today, but I'll force myself to do devotions, and then I'll get excited about it, you know. Sometimes we're waiting for the excitement, or we're waiting for the unction of the Lord to come on us. But there's a sense in which sometimes we just have to go and do it, and as we do it, then we become it. Or as we do it, we begin to embrace it. And that's why I thought this was such a very helpful chapter, because some people, I know, Raymond, are just kind of sitting around waiting. I said, well, I'll move when the Lord gives me direction. And you just got to be moving, and then the Lord will give you some direction.
Certainly easier to steer a horse that's moving than one that's sitting still. Well, in my life, I want to know where I am and how am I doing. And I just came up with the idea of there's mile markers, I think, to measure righteous character. Now, righteous character is hard to define, I think, to some degree, and it's kind of hard to know, am I becoming a righteous person? Certainly don't want to become self-righteous, but, you know, and so as I thought through what would I measure my progress as becoming a godly man, and I thought, well, the first thing I should do is seek God's kingdom. And then realizing that in business, so much of our success is around money, I said, you know what, I've got to tear my heart away from money. And then what do you do? How do you know, Jesus said, don't leave your stuff on earth, but send it ahead to heaven. And so how do we store our treasures in heaven? And that became a real battle for me is how do you send your treasures ahead? Is it just giving money away? Is it doing good things? What is that? And so for me, I figured that if your righteous character is defined a lot by what are you doing with your treasures?
So again, those are just a couple of those mile markers, and then storing treasures in heaven and some of those, just some great material in just that chapter on righteous character. I wanted to get into maybe the one on love and compassion too, because this would be helpful to managers. You manage a lot of people, and you talk about what you do when you interview new employees and just the need to have love and compassion. I think the typical manager just says, look, I'm just supposed to lead by example, and that's it. But you add a factor there that I thought was really significant in terms of love and compassion. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, when I was a younger architect, I wanted to be a good architect known by the quality and the professionalism. But I realized that our firm wasn't going to really achieve that if I didn't begin to love and take care of the people that worked with me. I really changed my attitude in our firm from being a good architect to be a good employer. And I didn't feel like I could be a good employer unless I got to know and actually love my employees. Now, that sounds kind of weird, I know, but how would I love them? Well, I would start looking at things from the standpoint, what's best for them. I even at one point had a list of all my employees, and I would pray for them over the week. I would pray for them in sections, certain guys, certain days. And it's hard to really be upset with someone if you're praying for them and if you love them. So.
And again, you've just got some great illustrations. And even when you interview new employees, you just talk about that. I mean, they must be really struck by that being the first time. They might say, I don't know if this guy's a Christian, but he must be, because I have been through a lot of interviews, and I've never heard in a prospective employer talk about how I love these people in my employee and I really want to try to serve them, which I thought was really striking.
Well, I'm certainly a sinful guy, and I struggle in a lot of areas. But I do want to say that I try to communicate to people that I've interviewed in the past that I really do love the people that work for me, and I've learned to try to take really good care of them. I said, I don't tell people that they work for a Christian firm, because they don't. They work for men in the firm that love God and try to live according to God's principles. But they certainly don't need to be Christians if you work for us. We want everyone to feel safe and comfortable working for us. But we also want them to know that we deeply care for them and that we want their best interests and not our own. So,
you talked about servanthood, and that gets us in. Of course, we talked about picking up the paper towels, but there's other illustrations, and that is the idea of wanting to give clients what they need, and then back to serving your employees. When we talk about servant leadership, sometimes we get into that conversation because Nick Pitts sits in this chair sometimes. And, of course, one of the things they talk about so often at Dallas Baptist University and other places is servant leadership. But that's something else, again, that I think is very characteristic of a Christian who actually is taking seriously the Word of God, because then they want to be a servant leader. True?
That is absolutely true, and I'm glad you brought up DBU. I've never experienced such servant-heartedness as the young men and women that attend there, because every time I go to the campus for an event, they always take such good care of me, and I appreciate and that comes from the top. That's the leadership. I tell you, one of the things that I really noticed is in certain companies that have servant-hearted leadership. Walmart was one of those companies that really exemplified that. Another one is Southwest Airlines. I love the fact that Gary Kelly, the president CEO of Southwest, always takes the middle seat when he flies in his own company plane. So
that is pretty fun. Or you can think of Hobby Lobby, the Green family.
Absolutely.
Here, they always make a point that when somebody ships them something and there is too many, they let them know there was too many. And there have been many of the vendors of Hobby Lobby say, this is the first time. We hear about when they undership, when they short ship us, but we have never had anybody come back and say, wait a minute, you said it's too many. And again, that's part of this idea of really ministering to your various clients and things like that. And you actually have a section there where you talk about some situations where you really want to give your clients what you need. There's some times where they might have a difficulty, and you're ready to resolve that because, after all, you really want to be a servant. And that's kind of a mindset that I think Christians need to develop.
I agree. sometimes you don't want to tell your client they're wrong. You can't do that. But sometimes you want to serve them in a way of giving them not necessarily what they asked for, but what they really were needing or what they meant to ask for.
Yeah.
And sometimes you do that at great risk. But I look at it, what would I want someone serving me to do? And so I've always looked at it from the standpoint of giving them what they asked for, but giving them an alternate as well. That might be what they really need.
That's good. Let's take a break. We'll come back and finish our conversation today with Raymond Harris. And again, if you just happen to join us, talking about his book, Business by Design, just taking a lot of these biblical principles and applying them to a business context. I certainly have benefited from his books, and this is the newest one out, 200 pages, and there's information on our website, pointofview.net. We'll be right back.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. A professor at Georgia State University has attempted to use a law once designed to curb the anonymity of the Ku Klux Klan to prevent a religious student from wearing a veil. Freshman Nabila Khan was surprised by her professor's request that she remove her niqab, a head covering and veil worn by some Muslim women as a part of their religious exercise. Khan wears her veil to her job and elsewhere, but her professor evidently thought it troubling enough to hand Khan a copy of the Georgia law disallowing masks that obscure the face when Khan declined to remove the veil. Georgia State University has explained the law to the professor and acknowledged the fact that veils are permitted on campus as a way to accommodate the free exercise of religion. You may be opposed to the idea that women should wear a niqab, but the principle is vitally important. If a state institution can marginalize one peaceful religious practice, it can act to marginalize the free exercise of any peaceful religious practice. And there's another important point to be made here as well. Georgia's governor has infamously vetoed a state's Religious Freedom Restoration Act, also known as RFRA. Khan's case presents one of the most routine examples of cases that benefit from a state's RFRA. Hopefully Governor Deal and the Georgia lawmakers can add that protection very soon. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Hi, I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. I hope you enjoyed this episode of First Liberty Briefing. You can learn more amazing stories about how everyday Americans are standing up and saving religious freedom. Just visit firstliberty.org. You'll be inspired, educated, and informed. Visit firstliberty.org right now.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Talking about the book by Raymond Harris, and it's entitled Business by Design. I thought I might take a phone call or two, not many, because, again, we want to focus on the book, but let's go to Missouri. I think Scott has got a good question here. So, Scott, you have the floor. What's your question?
Thanks, Kerby. I actually have two questions, and they're somewhat related. First question actually kind of relates to what's happening in the media with Brett Kavanaugh. It has to do with a client that you might be working for who might sell objectionable materials such as alcohol, or maybe it's a casino or something that's approached you to do a project. Well, what kind of conflict do you have spiritually about dealing with those kind of clients? And then a second question, which is somewhat related to that, is I've often heard quote Christian employees say, well, you need to work for me as somewhat as a ministry, and they want to pay you less than fair market value. What was your philosophy of that whenever you were running your business?
Yeah, and chapter 24 talks about diligence and hard work, so we'll get to that. But you probably have occasionally been asked to build a building that maybe you didn't agree with what was going to take place in the building. Has that ever been something you've had to deal with, Raymond?
Yeah, there was a time that I was asked to design a strip center that had less than appropriate activities going on. I actually turned it down.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not too good to do that, but I just didn't like the guy I was working for.
Yeah.
So it had more to do with him than what went on, because the buildings are kind of neutral, but it's the people you work for. I try to service anyone that needs service, but there is an appropriate level of service to certain activities that you just can't do as a believer. We try to be excellent in everything we do. We work very hard, and we try to really love people by what we do in all that we do professionally. So we don't we try not to isolate people. We try to love them by giving them good service, hard work, but we will definitely turn down certain clients.
Yeah, and
not
Jack Phillips
the
had to think
projects,
about that in Colorado, kind of bake a cake and those kinds of things. And
right.
I think Christians are going to always have to really struggle with that. But let's take the second one, because chapter 24, I think, is one where you talked about we're created for work, diligence and hard work, and the laborer is worthy of his hire. Right. If I can quote from the Greens, they have always said, we want to make sure that we pay more than minimum wage. We want to support our workers. They even cut back the number of hours. Matter of fact, again, you don't go to a Chick-fil-A on Sunday. You don't go to Hobby Lobby on Sunday because of some of those things. So it seems to me that, if anything, Christian employers should really be paying attention to how you pay individuals, because it gets back to that idea of golden rule, doesn't it?
That's right. I think as employers we should be generous. I don't think good stewardship means that a pastor would go to a printer and say, would you print our bulletins extra cheap, because that's good stewardship for us. Well, that's not good. That's not good for the printer. I mean, he needs to take care of his family. We ought to bonus people when they do a good job and be generous with them. We shouldn't overpay if the service isn't good, but if the service is good, I would actually recommend giving a bonus to people. And I've done that to some of my vendors, giving them unsolicited money.
That's amazing.
Do a good job.
And chapter 17, you've got this whole idea of generosity. Off air, we were talking about Jack Alexander's been on the program, and turns out you guys know each other even better than I suspected, since your name comes up every once in a while when we're talking with him. And he's written about generosity. He's written about mercy. But you have a chapter there about personal generosity, which is certainly important. And, of course, you've been a scoutmaster in the Boy Scouts for many years, and then also generosity with your employees and ownership transition and generosity with your partners. So help us think through that, because we are really admonished to be generous in our giving to the church, but we should apply the same principles in our business, shouldn't we?
Right. It goes back to, do you want people to be generous with you? And absolutely, a generous person is someone that everyone likes to be around.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned that when I was a little kid. I had a stepsister that my dad would give us a candy bar, and he said, split it and the other guy gets to choose. And no one could be more exacting than splitting that candy bar exactly in half, because you don't want to get the short end of that. And what I realized to be generous is we ought to offer the bigger piece.
That's really good. I love that story because, again, if you're going to split it and then one has 2/3, 1/3, but the other one gets to choose, we know what's going to happen there. We're just about out of time, and there's 27 chapters, and we've only mentioned most of them. I recognize that. But talk about how people can maybe use this book, because you have, of course, the biblical principles and then the business concept. And then at the end of each one of these chapters, you've got a whole series of verses for further study. So it seems to me that obviously Raymond, people could go through this individually, but I'm thinking the way this is put together, this might be a real good small group study, and you could either do one a week for 27 weeks, or since they're shorter chapters, maybe you could double up on some of those, although I suspect once you get into any of these chapters, it would really fill up a small group study. So talk about what might be available there.
Sure. The book was designed to be used simply. You could either read it or you could use it in a small group study. And I struggle through some books that at the end of each chapter it has a lot of questions and it seems laborious, and then I don't know how to answer the questions. So what I decided to do is just put scriptural verses that relate to that subject at the end, and then let that person read through and ask the Holy Spirit to speak to them. And the chapters are short and simple. The whole book is actually very simple. The intention was to be 150 pages. I don't know how we got 200 out of it, but it was supposed to be a short book. But it's broken up so that you could very easily go through it and look at each subject. I wrote it like an architect. It's very simple to dissect and to understand.
I might just mention that your website, let's talk about the one that relates to the website right now, has the older book, The Heart of Business. It is RaymondHharris.com, or don't have to worry about it, just simply click on the link. And the first thing I love is you've got the Heart of Business video. It's a little kind of trailer for the book, and it is outstanding because your friends, the Irwin brothers, put it together. So it's very well done. And if you don't have the first book, I might just mention it was published by Nav Press. You probably can still find it, but probably easier to just order it. And it is available, of course, from various vendors, but also, most importantly, online. And then this book has just come out, so I would recommend that probably the best way for people to get it would be online, don't you think?
Yeah, right now.
And talk about what's available on the website for Business by Design, because that's a second website that people can go to as well.
Business by Design has where you can buy it. You can click on it, and it'll take you right to the links of numerous places, Barnes & Noble, of course, Amazon, Walmart will sell it. It's kind of fun to have Walmart selling my book. I love that, so I appreciate them. But it's an easy website to navigate. It also has some reviews from some of my friends that have reviewed the book, and I really appreciate that. It also has a video that is a summation. I know that younger people like to watch videos and don't like to read, so we realize that younger people watch 100 movies a year and probably read one book. I hope they read my book.
I hope they do, too. And again, my assignment, since we're running out of time, is for you to go and find those two videos, one on Heart of Business, one on Business by Design, and then click the share button. Put it on your Facebook page or put it on a Twitter feed, or maybe send it to someone who needs to know about this. And again, just one last time, Business by Design, applying God's wisdom for true success. Raymond Harris with us, and it is just great to have you in studio once again.
A lot of fun. Thank you, Kerby.
That's all we have for today, and I hope you'll take the time to click on the website to pointofview.net. That's where you'll find some of that information, and I would encourage you to get maybe 2 copies of the book, Business by Design. You'll certainly benefit from the material that he has in there. I want to thank Andrew and Steve for their help behind the scenes. We'll see you back here tomorrow for our Millennial Roundtable.
Protect the health of the nation. Join the Point of View Truth Team. Pointofview.net/team. Pointofview.net/team. Or call 800-347-5151.
Good news. You are not stuck with your health care plan. Really. You have a choice, and it's a great one. It's called MediShare, and if you've heard about it and wondered what exactly it is, it's a way that people share their health care bills. And these are people who have a common faith, who want to be part of something beautiful that not only meets their healthcare needs, but the needs of others too. And it's people who love to save money, big time. MediShare members typically save $500 a month per family on their healthcare costs. That is a life changer for people. So this could be for you. Maybe it's what you've been looking for, a way to pay healthcare bills that's not only very smart financially, but it's even profound. MediShare is a nonprofit with 400,000 members nationwide who pray for and share with each other. So yes, you're not stuck. There's another way, and it could save you a lot. Find out more. Call 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.